I've had a chance to talk with the gentleman I have on the line right now before when he was in town, and I don't remember how many years ago it's been, but we had a conversation in the Ramada Inn on Bloomington's west side the last time Mark Twain Tonight was performed. Mr. Holbrook, how are you?
Fine, 1978, 20 years ago.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
I had a delightful conversation with you, and I was so impressed, I thought maybe I'd aged you dramatically because after I'd talked with you, I saw you on stage, and boy, you look like you put on quite a few years. You know that?
I put on quite a few years in the last 20, too.
It's a real treat to talk with you again. Since the last time we've talked, I imagine you've done Mark Twain Tonight a number of times, haven't you?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah,
every year I do, anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen dates. It depends, how the rest of my work goes. I mean, whether I'm doing a play or movies or whatever, But,
or television shows like Evening Shade, right?
Yeah, Evening Shade or something, movies or whatever. But I do the number of Twain dates that I feel I need to do to help my income along and to keep the show going.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy doing the show. I keep putting new material on a lot.
Is Mark Twain still writing new stuff?
Oh, yeah, he's still writing new stuff. Yeah, I'm working on a new Huckleberry number right now. I've got 3, and this will be my 4th. And I find the character in the book totally fascinating and a very topical book
right.
In terms of what's going on today, racial unrest and misunderstanding, etc. And it's very interesting to do material from this book because a lot of people don't understand exactly what Mark Twain's talking about, and it's easier to make it clear when you do it on the stage.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. Some people reading irony and satire don't get it. I don't know why. It seems pretty clear to me, but some people don't. So when you do it on the stage, it's possible to make it clear what the author's talking about.
Yeah. There are a lot of laughs in the show, although I imagine if people just read it from the book, they would miss them completely, like you said. There's this part where one gentleman was always threatening to commit suicide, and you figure he never had any encouragement, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's it turns into a little political number.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year I put on a couple new numbers, and one of them is very intensely political, and then a lot of the events that have taken place in the last year in Washington just seem to feed into it as if it'd been written for him.
What do you think Mark Twain would have to say about President Clinton at this time? Would he be saying just leave the man alone, or would he say go for the throat? What do you think?
I've thought of that. It's a very interesting question, and I don't think it's easy to answer. To begin with, Mark Twain was a deeply moralistic man. In his own self. He was very moralistic. To try to translate what he would say today, having been a man who lived in the so-called Victorian age, the last part of the last century, in the first 10 years of this century, the values of that day and the values of our time now are so different, so utterly different, that we have departed so far from the moral standards that defined society in Mark Twain's day, that it's a little difficult to assess, to estimate what Mark Twain would say about what's going on in Washington with the presidency today. I do think that he would not, as some people are doing, sort of minimize the importance of the behavior of the captain of our ship.
Mm-hmm. We'd like to think that we put people in office who are above and beyond the average Joe citizen, I would think, to hold the highest office in the land.
Well, isn't that why we elect them?
Yes, exactly right. Have you been to Hannibal, Missouri? I was there a couple of years ago, and I couldn't help but think about you while I was there, and your portrayal of Mark Twain, of course.
I was there last year, actually, last fall. I had a date up in Burlington, Iowa, so I rented a car in St. Louis and drove up the river and stopped and had lunch with Henry Sweets and the curator, and looked over the museum and the new museum that they have, the new building they have. It's a wonderful new building they have there. They're going to be putting a lot of exhibits in there.
Mm-hmm. The river doesn't change. You sort of get a feel for what it must have been like growing up there, don't you?
Yeah, you do. I think you get more of a feel just from reading Mark Twain's books. It's not a sleepy little town anymore the way it was, you know.
Right.
And none of those towns are sleepy anymore. They're not that sleepy anyway. Maybe sleepy by New York standards or Hollywood standards, but they're quite different.
But at the same time, you understand maybe why he had a chance to get a feel for the world, because he lived on the river and saw people who would come to town. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah, it's a little hard for us to imagine or visualize in our present day what life was like along the river, and what a really a furious kind of exciting, many-dimensioned society rode up and down that river on those steamboats. I mean, there were all kinds of people were carried on that. And it was a floating, wonderland for people living in these little towns, because they had everything from fancy men and women, fancy ladies and gentlemen, to fancy men and women that weren't ladies and gentlemen, and all kinds of people, thieves and tough and cultured, and it was a really a big cross section, and they're floating right down, stopping at a town somewhere, and you can imagine what the young people, especially young and old, but the young people, looking at this floating palace filled with this life that was way beyond what they were experiencing in their little town. It's very intriguing and exciting and luring. It lured a person to get out and go adventure. Adventuring in those days was a little bit more clear-cut and simple than it is today. You didn't have to cut through quite so much red tape.
Speaking of more clear and simple, I want to ask you when we come back from a break, what do you think about some of the talk about taking Mark Twain out of the schools and bringing in some other authors instead? We're talking with Hal Holbrook on WJBC. Hal Holbrook's with us. He's going to be in Mark Twain Tonight, a show he's put on many times. It is one terrific evening in the theater, and it will be here April 2nd at Brighton Auditorium. Hal Holbrook, I sort of posed this question. I've heard some comments recently. We have to get Mark Twain out of the libraries and bring in some other authors. I think Shakespeare was also mentioned as being removed. I didn't know that was a problem, that kids were reading too much Shakespeare. But you've probably heard these things too, and maybe that's why you've been concerned about keeping Mark Twain around. What do you think?
Well, I don't think anybody should go to war over which author is studied and which isn't in schools. I think that I'd stop short of that, because a great author like Mark Twain or a great playwright like Shakespeare will survive any kind of moronic assessment in any given decade, because they are much bigger than the people who are criticizing them. So I don't worry much about that. If Mark Twain is just too much for certain people to take, then they don't have to take them. There's a lot of authors. You should never have to jam any author down some kid's throat, and especially one where you have a classroom filled with minorities, especially young black kids. If they're not introduced to Huckleberry Finn, for example, clearly, if they aren't introduced to the book as an historical document, which it is, it's probably the best historical coverage of that part of our country back in the last century of any book we have, better than a history book. It really should be taught as a history book. It should, because it is. It tells it like it was.
Can you tell from your audiences?
He uses the word nigger, which nobody wants to listen to anymore or hear, but there's no other way to tell the story and to tell to talk about racism, 100 and more years ago.
You can't deny the fact that it was here.
No, you can't. The point is, Huckleberry Finn is a book about racism. It's not a racist book. It's a book about racism.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who doesn't, wait a minute, I got a dog attacking somebody. Just a minute.
We're talking with Hal Holbrook. Let's break for this. We're back in a moment on WJBC.
Yeah.
All right, we got the dogs all settled down, right?
All right.
Got that raccoon out of the yard. And
Okay.
we were talking about Mark Twain's work. I'm just curious, as time changes, do the laughs that you get in your show vary in this politically correct time that we find ourselves in? Do you find that people are not reacting the way they did to your material or your Mark Twain's material, say 20 years ago? Has it changed?
No, I don't. No, there's very little difference. I don't know. There's something about Twain's material that is so. It's timeless. It really is. I'm not just saying this to, prep up the show. It's just timeless. People say, well, you get a different response in the South than you do in the West or than you do in Boston and L.A. or whatever. No. The response is generally the same wherever I go. It just really depends. The only time I run into audiences that are not as responsive and giving and helpful to me as other audiences, most audiences, is where you run into a place where people are shy and haven't gone to the theater much and don't really know how to behave there because they're afraid to laugh.
Right.
Afraid to express their emotions.
It is.
And that just makes the work harder for the actor.
This is one of those evenings, though, where you will learn about...
I want to get back to what question you asked. I'll get off the subject of Huckleberry and just you asked a question having to do with reading
Mm-hmm.
and taking authors and books and out of the schools, whatever. Well, we live at a time when they're closing down libraries and building more athletic facilities. We're living at a time when a pair of sneakers is becoming the symbol of the United States of America, and reading is not. The use of language is diminishing in its expertness. It's being put into a category that is not given priority. In other words, it's not considered important. We're dealing with a society where we're more and more playing around with knobs and dials and recorded voices instead of human beings. We got people looking into little computer screens or little screens in their home. Even when you check into a hotel, they don't look up at you anymore and say hello. They're looking at the screen. We're dealing in a society that is becoming more and more ingrown, more concerned with my feelings instead of anybody else's. Me. You get people growing up becoming more afraid of dealing with each other, looking each other in the eye, having real interpersonal relationships because they're hiding behind television screens, computer screens, and buttons.
Or dashboards. You don't want to look at anybody else on the highway either, right?
Yeah. So the point is, language is like, forget it. Who needs it? What? We got phrases like, no problem.
Right.
No problem. What does no problem mean? Would you kindly explain to me what no problem means? You know what it means to me. When I say, thank you, appreciate that, and somebody says, no problem. You know what it means to me?
What does it mean?
Screw off. You don't have to thank me. That's what it means. It's like sticking your hand in somebody's face and saying, no problem. It's like, stay away from me.
Right.
Don't get close.
In L.A., they say, let's do lunch and mean the same thing, don't they?
Say, you're welcome. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
They can't say, you're welcome. They are have you noticed? They are unable to say, you're welcome, or even to say thank you. Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
You're right.
Around, you'll hear it.
You're right. I was going to bring up something else here about how you get ready for the role. And what I like about theater versus some other activities that people can be involved in, you come away after a good night of theater knowing more about life and knowing more about how to react with human beings. And that's what this evening is, I think. Mark Twain tonight. You do learn more about life. You learn more about getting along. And I'm sure that's something you wouldn't argue with, right?
No, I wouldn't, and I think that one of the ways you learn best is through laughter.
I think you're right.
A wonderful man named Harold Clurman, who was a great theater critic, a great theater man, and, sorry, the gardener just started a lawnmower going out of wave him down.
So just so he doesn't mow the dogs.
Yeah.
Okay.
He had a phrase that I thought was wonderful. He said, "The truth doesn't taste good to most people. They don't like to listen to it, and they don't like the taste of it. So what you have to do is make them laugh, and while their mouth is open, you pour it in."
I do like that.
I love it.
There's something that's reassuring, too, if you're in the same group, the same audience, laughing at the same stuff together. You feel like you have a common bond, and you walk out of there a little more secure, I think. You know it?
That's very true, yeah. It reaffirms our hope that we all have some common thing going, some connection.
I talked with somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they were so impressed, and I'm impressed with your work, too, I really am. They said when you worked on stage with them, you just felt like you were just devoting all of your energy into directing your comments to that other actor on stage. When you're on stage by yourself, you pretend you're Mark Twain talking to a group much as he did years ago. He would go around and speak on a circuit, right?
Yeah, well, the whole point of acting is to communicate, to your audience. And when you're acting a solo thing like I am, the audience is the other actor. And when you're acting in a play, you're dealing with the other actor, and you're talking to that person. You're talking to that person, and through talking to that person, the audience, listening, observing, they get it. But the point is, first time I ever did, I never did a Chekhov play until 5 or 6 years ago. And the director, Jerry Friedman, I've worked with several times, a wonderful director. And Chekhov is a very real kind of, the acting, you can't act in there. You have to really talk to each other. That's what Chekhov demands, because it's such a naturalistic playwright he is. And I would rehearse. We were doing Uncle Vanya, and I was playing Uncle Vanya. And I had this scene with one of the characters named Sonia, and and he kept telling me I was acting. So I was trying to make contact with the other actress and really trying to just talk to her. So one day I thought I'd done it very well in rehearsal, and at the end of the scene I looked at Jerry and I said, "Jerry, that was it, wasn't it? I mean, I really felt, I think I got it." And he said, "No, Hal, it was awful. You're acting. Stop acting. Talk to her." It was awful. He drove me nuts, But he made me learn how important it is to talk. Acting is talking to another person.
Yeah.
That's what it's really all about.
Knowing what's going on. You've heard that old joke, haven't you, about the guy that had one line in the play, and that was, "Hark, I hear a cannon roar." Right. You just made me think of it by what you were saying. But
the worst thing is to have one line.
Yeah.
That's deathly.
For people who don't know the story, this actor finally gets a job, as I was told the story, and he practices that one line over and over, "Hark, I hear a cannon roar."
Oh, yeah.
And then it's his first night on, and just before he goes on stage, or as he comes on stage, there's this big, this big noise in the background of a cannon going off, and his response was, "What the hell was that?"
I had, when we were doing the original Lincoln Center Repertory Company in New York back in the early 60s, we did open with Arthur Miller's After the Fall, and Jason Robards was playing the lead, and they were trying to get all the actors in. So I had a little one-line part where I came on and said a line, and that's it, went off. And Jason Robards has a way of acting the role, but at the same time you look in his eyes and it's like a whole nother life going on, and he's looking at you, as yourself, the actor, So I come on, and I have this one line, and I was so scared I was going to screw it up,
It's hard to get into the rhythm of the play if you only have one line.
Oh, yeah. So I walk out, and I have my one line, and Jason is looking at me, and I see his eyes twinkling. And I know that he is looking at me and saying, "You're going to really screw this up." I can see it now. Holbrook, you're going to screw this up.
But you didn't, did you?
I forget. Probably.
No, I look at you as one of the best actors in America today. I really do.
Thank you.
I think you're terrific, and your presentation of Mark Twain is, from what I know, flawless. It is wonderful. We're going to invite people out to see you. Our time is running out here. I could go on and on with you, but I know you have a lot of other things. But we'll invite people to see Mark Twain tonight at Braden Auditorium on April 2nd. Get your tickets. It's one evening that all ages would enjoy. You can laugh. You're not going to be embarrassed if you watch this. There's no language that little kids couldn't hear, is there?
No, there isn't.
And it's a treat.
It's one thing, about Twain. I watch the TV, the comedy hours and things sometimes. It seems like comedians today can't tell a joke, can't try to be funny without, using bathroom humor or swearing, swear words. Well, Mark Twain can make an audience laugh at the rate of 4 seriously big laughs a minute without ever using one swear word.
Yeah. And I think you've said this before, too. There were times where you were doing this show, and you discovered laughs yourself that maybe you didn't know were going to be there, didn't you?
That's true. I'm pretty dumb,
But it's like any material. The more you look at it, I would think maybe you discover something else here. All great material always has something more to be discovered, perhaps.
That's very true, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to thank you very much. Thank you for being on, and I'm looking forward to seeing the show. I will see you April 2nd.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.